Hey guys, it's the Conic. And if you're anything like me, you've probably spent way more time than you'd like to admit thinking about what on earth you're going to be league starting for Secrets of the Atlas on Friday. Now, in this video, I'm going to be going over the high budget PoB for what I eventually settled on, which is the Doriani's prototype Wretched Defilers. Now, if you're not already familiar with Wretched Defilers, they are a lightning spell projectile using monsters that are typically found in T17 maps. This makes them prime candidates to be used with Doriani's prototype, which is an item we can use to get enemies lightning resistance to -200, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But before we go over the items, I want to first start with the Ascendancies and our Ascendancy choices. We are opting for Mindless Aggression as our first Ascendancy, into Bone Barrier for the Leech and PDR, as well as Mistress of Sacrifice for block chance, and then finally Plague Bringer for extra damage and damage reduction. Now we can go into items, and this brings us into the core of the build that I mentioned earlier, Doriani's prototype. What Doriani's does is it makes nearby enemies lightning resistance equal to yours, so you can get that as low as possible to be a big damage multi, but it also makes lightning resistance you take not affected by a lightning resistance. So this means you have no damage reduction from your lightning res. Instead, it's mitigated by armor from hits. Now this is not great because armor as a mechanic is not going to do barely anything against lightning damage coming. So what you ideally want to do is you want to convert all the lightning damage you take into other elements so that you also mitigate against lightning dots as well as lightning hits. And how we are doing that is using a Sublime Vision with Purity of Ice to make it so we can only use Purity of Ice aura, but this converts 30% of fire and lightning damage to cold damage taken while we have Purity of Ice. And then we pair this with a Watcher's Eye that has a similar effect while we have Purity of Ice, fire and lightning damage to cold. This gives us about 50% conversion, and for the remaining 50%, we are employing a Glorious Vanity in the name of Zibakwa, which gives us the Keystone Divine Flesh. This is 50% elemental damage taken as chaos, and that completes our 100% of lightning damage taken as other elements. But because of the nature at which we converted, we're able to completely ignore fire res, and of course we still want negative lightning res. This brings us into how we get negative lightning res. We are using Calandra rings for the negative lightning range, and we are copying that with a Calandra's touch. This is essentially the core of how we're going to be pumping damage with this build. If you're enjoying the content and you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps a lot with the algorithm and with our 2025 goal of getting 2,000 subs, after which I will be doing a face reveal on stream and here on YouTube. Now for the other items here, we are going to be using a +2 minion one that has trigger to help us trigger our offering and which helps us cap our block chance. We're using Svalin for lucky block, and we're using Wraith Lord so we can have 4 extra specters, in this case bringing us to a max of 8. Now we haven't heard anything about Svalin on the patch notes, but I'm inclined to believe it's still very much in the game and will just be rarer than it was lastly because there'll be less people farming settlers. Then we have the 4 ghastly eye jewels. The most important stats here are is the flat lightning and the life. Past that, you want to have leech, and you want to have, if you can, you want to have attack cast speed. And then you have chaos res because we have your other sources of minion chaos res, so this just makes them tankier. But again, the core is still flat lightning, life, and then minion attack cast speed. Then Doriani's prototype, and we are here going for gloves and boots that are armor evasion hybrid. We're going for armor evasion hybrid so that we can actually use spell suppress, and as you can see here, we are spell suppress capped. We only need spell suppress on our gloves, we do not need on our boots, but if you do not get like a good roll spell suppress, then you might have to supplement with either A, getting a higher roll on your implicits, going for like, this is the bottom row suppress, or alternatively you could just get some suppress on your boots or opt into specking into a bit more on the tree. Boots are actually kind of important because you will have to self-craft these most likely, but we're going for elevated raised Spectre boots, which instead of giving +1 they give +2, and we're also going for aspect of the crab on either boots or gloves. Doesn't really matter which one you want it on, just know it can go on either one. Aspect of the crab is an aspect which gives you physical damage reduction for each half a second. I think it's about 2%, and if you take physical damage from any source, it uses that physical damage reduction and then removes all your stacks, so you can stack again, and it caps out at about 12 stacks. We currently have this set to 6 because with filing we shouldn't be taking many hits anyways. The PoB is currently set to having half of them up, which takes about 3 seconds, and most of the time you're probably going to be closer to like 9 or 12, but I think 6 is a fair guesstimate to just get a fair value of how tanky we are on average. Basically, we are opting for an Nettle's Vow. The other alternative was going for a Dragonfang's Flight, but Nettle's Vow I think beats out a Dragon's Fight flank, because here you can actually get minus lightning reg to help you hit that minus 200 mark in case your ring is not that great. Plus the Dragonfang's Flight also comes with elemental res, which also is not ideal because again it then gives us lightning res, which we're trying to get as low as possible. And another reason we went for Unetals is we only care about 2 elements anyways, cold and chaos, so it's very easy to find something that we can use essentially. Then for the ring, this is where we're getting all our minus res from. In the ideal universe you have attack, cast speed, and you have damage here, but if you can't get either or, but the most important stat here is minus lightning res. That is the big damage multi, and then you can just use Kalandra's touch to get that ring again essentially. Then we are using a mage blood. This is going to be, again, this is a very high budget build, so this is not what we're going to be obviously using league start, but this is going to be where we're trying to get to. And then Progenesis for life loss delay to make it so it's harder to one-shot us, paired with a bunch of mage blood flasks essentially for max cold res, chance to avoid bleeding, immunity to bleeding rather, chance to avoid shock for storm shroud, the list goes on. And then in the way of jewels, we have a rational doctrine, which is here strictly for consecrated ground. This gives us a very healthy amount of life regen, and it also gives our minions the same % life regen. Storm shroud, so we're ailment immune with the flask with chance to avoid shock flask. Sublime vision, so we can actually convert to 100%, and same thing goes for Watcher's Eye. Impossible escape, so that we can opt to get PDR note if you get one that has good options here. If you do not have good options in this vicinity, then you can opt for a differential. Think like Fortress Covenant here, and then Immutable Force takes the spot here. What's next? Watcher's Eye, we've talked about that. Glorious Vanity, Immutable Force, so we are stun immune, and by being stun immune we can actually opt out of Brian King and go for Lunaris, because we are now stun immune and we are ailment immune. This gives us extra PDR and extra elemental damage reduction. And then past that, you just want a 12 passive. You want a 12 passive minion cluster and a small cluster with chaos res. A small cluster with chaos res, so you can get 3 max chaos res for even more survivability. Moving on to the skills section, we are going to be using our raised Spectre in our body armor. This is going to be where our Wretched Defilers are, and we're going to be using 6 of them. We have them linked with Pierce, minion damage, control destruction, lightning damage, and spell echo. And they're going to have Empower level 4 in the amulet, which essentially is like having a replica of Dragonfang's Flight, except we don't get all the bad mods it has for this build. Then we have in our trigger weapon Bone Offering for block chance for us, and Desecrate, so you can trigger that properly. And then we just have Tempest Shield there for spell block, and then we have Shield Charge, faster attacks, Frog Link. If we already have a decent amount of attack speed, but it feels better to have faster attacks. If we need an extra gem, this is where it's going to come out of. We have Steel Skin over here. We cast when damage taken, so it's available whenever we take enough damage for it to be necessary. Purity of Ice, and then Convocation. We need this for our Watcher's Eye and max res, as well as Sublime Vision. Then Convocation, and then this is going to be our support Spectres. Our support Spectres in this case are going to be Guardian Turtle and Forest Warrior. Guardian Turtle providing a determination aura, so we can get the second Watcher's Eye mod, which is physical damage reduction while affected by determination, as well as Forest Warrior for Calling Strike and Onslaught for our minions and ourselves, which is again more attack speed to make Shield Charge a bit more fluid. This overall is going to make it feel very, very comfy using Shield Charge. And then we have Aspect of the Crab before I forget, and then there's a simulation for Enfeeble, which we are going to be getting with Corrupted Gravebind from our Mercenaries gloves, but more on that in a bit. Now, last but not the least is going to be our Mercenary Now with our mercenaries, there's a lot we don't know about them, like how much res they spawn with, if they spawn with negative or positive or 0 res, if we have to cap it manually or other things, and we don't know how much health they actually spawn with and how much speccing into defensive gear we actually have to do to have them survive in regular content. So with this in mind, this is very subject to change, but I have left a few rings, like my ring slots open, as well as the belt slot is kind of on the more optional side. Now with this in mind, the core of this setup is going to be Gravebind, which makes nearby enemies killed by anyone count as being killed by the mercenary, paired with Explode Chest and Explode Axe, which both make enemies you kill have a chance to explode, dealing a 10 to their damage as phase damage to nearby enemies as well, which can create chain explosions. We have this paired with a Replica Victorious Charity for a chance to grant Endurance and Frenzy charges, Endurance charge on hit and Frenzy charge on kill. Then we have a Crown of the Tyrant, which should give our Wretched Defilers flat lightning damage, as well as our Mercenary. And then all of this is paired with a Windscreen for +1. Curse, which is going to be Enfeeble on hit, Corrupted, Gravebind being the source of our curse. And then Percusor is also very important for the Mercenary, because this is a very big damage multiplier for our Wretched Defilers. Now, if like I said earlier, we do need to be more defensive with our mercenaries, then there are some slots we can open up, like our belts. We can consider switching our boots, our shield. There are a lot of options here, but the core can function with him, and having an explode mercenary should provide a lot of wave play and utility. Over the next few days, I am also going to be testing the leveling progression of this build, and we'll make a detailed guide for how to league start it along with low and medium budget PoBs. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. And while on that note, if you enjoyed the video, do consider dropping a like, as well, as it both helped the channel out a lot. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment section. And with all that said, thank you for watching.